Okay, it's a rainy day out there in the nation's capital, and we're going to be taking a look at the game Storm Over Jerusalem, recently published in April here, 2022, from Multiman Publishing and designed by Scott Blanton. Now, I was not aware that the Storm Over system had been used in several games prior. And doing a little bit of research on Board Game Geek, I found out that the first one in the title technically was done by Avalon Hill. That would have been back in 1981. Later on, MMP took over the franchise, I guess you might say, and did this excellent game called Storm Over Stalingrad in 2006. They later did, in 2015, Storm Over Normandy, which appeared in their Special Ops magazine. There's been many other iterations of the Storm Over system, and there was even a Japanese edition of Storm Over Leyte Gulf. So it's a franchise that's been around for a little while, but I think it's under MMP that the system kind of really glows. Now, I was not a great fan of area movement games. I have very few in my collection. The one that stands out for me is the old SPI 1812 game about Napoleon and Russia. I do like that one a lot. Other than that, I don't have a lot of area movement games. I just found them very problematic. But I must say, after purchasing Storm Over Jerusalem here, I had a pleasant surprise. I think I'm completely won over to this Storm Over system. It is area movement, and it does concern the siege of Jerusalem by the Romans against the Judeans in 70 AD, and it's perfectly suited for that siege. Now, I had played the old Siege of Jerusalem by Avalon Hill, which was a hexagon grid game, had a very large map, and was a very detailed game. It took a long time to play it. Even playing a scenario took up quite a chunk of time. I eventually abandoned it. It was a good game, but a little too detailed for me. So when this one was advertised, some 2 years ago, I immediately put in a pre-order for it. And I've only owned the game now for about 2 weeks. One thing that I immediately liked was the sortation. I could get, I used one GMT tray, fits right in the box, and I was able to set up the counters by area, because you virtually put every counter on the board, and you can get all your counters in one counter tray, except for the wall markers, which I decided, since they were all the same, might as well just put them in bags to show the disintegration of the walls. So in that sense, the game is very easy to set up, and it's easy to play. Now, the rule book is one of the best I've seen in a long time. How many pages is it? It's 12 pages, including the back cover. It's profusely illustrated. Lots of illustrations. And I had no trouble at all reading it and understanding it. Now, coming to play it was a different matter. I did a few things wrong, and I've reset up my game here once or twice, because there's some new concepts in here that I was not familiar with. But it's an easy game to learn and an easy game to play. And as always, I always work from copies. So I made a copy of the rules, and then I can do my little highlighting and underlining and emphasizing and making my little notes. Because like I said, there's some concepts here that just really threw me, especially when I saw some of the questions on Board Game Geek. One fellow asking a question, and I thought, oh, that's a weird question. And when I began to play it, I said, no, it's not that weird. It had to do with attacking units. He was asking if attacking units are ever, do they ever take casualties? And the answer is they don't, which kind of freaked me out. But once I understood the system, how it works, I said, wow, this is brilliant. This is exactly correct for the Siege of Jerusalem. I'll get to the combat there in a minute. But let's take a look at this beautiful board. The counters are beautiful. They're large. It's a nice, clear board. The rules are excellent. The player cards are excellent. They're very clear. two-sided. Most of your game is right on these cards. One aspect of the game I really enjoyed was the cards. Now, I'm no stranger to card-driven games and card-assisted games, but Scott Blanton with these cards has done something I haven't quite seen in other games. In many games, when there's a individual deck for each side, here the Roman deck and the Judean deck, I find that you might get a deck of 55 cards. And you look at the cards, and these are really nice looking. Great graphics, very clear numbers, and description of what the card can do. Now I found that in many games, they might have a bunch of cards, but in the end, they kind of all do the same thing. It might say, well, add +3 to the attacker's die roll. Or another card might say -3 to the attacker's die roll. Or add 2 to the defender's die roll. And the events are very, very similar. These cards I found were really good because the wording is very important and it's in the rules. For example, in this card it says, for your impulse. So if you play this card, that will be your impulse. That's all you can do. While other cards are worded slightly different that say, when the card text starts with play as part of your impulse, you can do your impulse and play the card. So each of the cards and the texts are very important. And I found the text and the illustrations just terrific on these. And there wasn't hardly any card that was exactly like another. So ballistas do not work the same way as, let's say, siege towers and stuff. Here's one on captured Roman arms. Here's one on onagers, which just happens to be a model I have myself of an onager. I can show you that later. And there's like a rock attack from the walls. Certain conditions have to be in place in order for you to play this card. But I just found the events just fascinating. And the Roman has also some neat events too. Siege ramps, really cool. I keep thinking of the miniseries Masada when I see that. The testudo, which help you in defense. And Titus's leadership, where you can draw 3 cards. So these cards really make the game. I think it's a very strong point of this area movement game. The map is your 22-inch by 34-inch map and doesn't take up my whole table. And the game can be played in several hours, which is a big strong point for me. Up here at the top is the turn track. And the game could last 7 or 8 turns, and your victory point track is just below it. Now what you see is not the setup. I'm actually on about turn 5 of the game. The red units are Romans, consisting of mainly 3 legions. Each counter represents a section of a legion. And you get auxiliary counters, which is your kind of your light infantry with light missiles. You've got siege towers in it, special counters. You can make siege ramps. The Judean player is divided into 2 factions, one under Simon, that would be the blue pieces, and the other faction under John. Now, if you read about the siege, the Judean forces were highly divided. They didn't quite get along in many, many particulars, and there are rules for that. The map is just gorgeous, shows beautiful areas of the city. The symbol around the circles shows you how well the terrain is defensible. There's really 2 levels, a +2 defense, like this area 12, or this heavily, the heavy symbol is +3 for defense. The combat, which I will describe later, is quite unique. I've not seen this kind of combat system before. That's why it threw me for a loop and why I was doing the game wrong. Of course, the objective of the Romans is to break into the city, take the Temple Mount and this Herod's palace here, and gain more victory points. That's the objective. Now it's an impulse system, In other words, the Roman player will play first. He'll do one action or impulse. Then the Judean player will do his, back and forth, until there's no cards left or until both players pass. Now, in your impulse, you can do one of three things. You can do a card action, play the card exactly for what it says. That can be a whole action, depending on the wording of the card. Or you can discard a card, or pass, or perform a unit action. Now, when you perform a unit action, you activate an area, not an individual unit, an area. So if you activated, let's say, the tower area here, 5 units in there could move in. And of course, the walls of Jerusalem play a huge part. Each of the walls has a little +4 box on it, which means the Judean player adds 4 to his defense if the Roman player tries to cross it, which is one of the reasons you build siege towers. If you build a siege tower, the siege tower takes 3 off the defense of the wall, making it like 1. So there's reasons to build siege towers. It's very good, I think, at showing siege warfare. Now, here's what caught me by surprise. I'm going to give a simple example of play, and you'll see what I mean. I guess most players are playing it correct because they're familiar with the Storm Over series, but I was not. So I've made a few errors, and I'll explain what those are. Now, for this example, I'm going to assume that the wall has been breached over here in the Tower of Persepolis area, and the Romans are attacking the Judean player. Now, when you do an attack, you add the attack factors of all of the attacking units. In this case, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8. 8 attack factors. Then you take the 1 unit of the Judean defense, obviously the best one. So we'll take this one, 8. So his defense is 8. Plus he gets to add the defense of the terrain, which in this case is 2. So 8 plus 2 is 10. And we had, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have a -2 result in that attack. Now, before rolling the dice, the attacker could use any tactical cards he has, which will aid in that attack. The Judean player also could use any cards he has in that attack before rolling the dice. The green ones, green text, means that the card can be played during the enemy's turn. And here is what threw me off. Now, it's rule 8.3.3 that really caught me by surprise, because I had not seen it in any other game. Now, in our example, we had 8 in the attack, and we had 10 in the defense, which means the Roman attack is -2. So I was playing that the Roman player has to take at least 2 hits on units. That isn't what you do. When an attack is repulsed, all the units are flipped to their opposite side, and that's it. So I was stunned. I said, whoa, that means attacking is pretty easy. I just wasn't used to that. But as I read more about the siege, I began to see what the strategy really is. Sure, the attacks are kind of free, and you can get away with murder. Good for diversionary attacks. But what you can't calculate for is in the Judean turn, who will be moving next, he can counterattack. Then he's the attacker. Oh, I forgot to mention too, the attacker rolls 2 dice and adds that to his 8 value. So in that case, I really should have shown, let's say, the Romans rolling a 2. Okay, 8 plus 2 is 10, which would have equaled the Judean defense. So they would still flip over because they had not won the attack. But the Judean player, when he attacks, he would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. the Roman would take the highest unit, 8, and he would roll 2 dice and add it to his attack value. So in this case, it would be 7. 7 plus 5 is 12, and the other fellow's defense is 8. So he would have to take 4 hits, and that could be very serious because then units would be destroyed and removed from the board. So this is the magic of that game, is the attack and counterattack. If you don't counterattack and put the enemy off, you may not be winning the game. So like I said, we're on turn 5 here, and that's how much progress I've made, which isn't very much. The Judean player has 10 points, and the Roman player has 12. That's not going to be enough to win the game. And because of certain results I got in cards, the game is going to end in 2 turns. So as the Roman player, I've got 2 turns to defeat the Judeans and capture these areas. I don't think I can do that. So it probably shows my inexperience. Now we haven't looked at the bottom of the board here. There's all kinds of rules for the valley here, where you can't put siege engines. The valley was too steep, and you couldn't really put siege engines there. The Fortress of Antonia is going to be very tough nut to crack, and you can see the units all around the city. There's also the ability of the Roman to surround the city and cut off the supply of the Judean units. This will mean that they can't refresh a lot of units. And you can see up there in the upper right kind of a dead pile of the Romans and Judean forces that I've lost in battle. I don't want to say too much more about the game lest I say something wrong, because like I said, I'm still learning it. But this game alone has changed my whole attitude towards area movement games. I've seen a system here that works very well. It's got good reviews on Board Game Geek. I see, I think it's the Player's Aid. They've already done a video on it. I think they liked it. I certainly like it. I liked it enough to order or arrange a trade with somebody to get the Storm Over Normandy. So I'm going to try at least one other Storm Over series. I'm also curious about the Storm Over Stalingrad. That got very good reviews too. So, I don't know, if you're into ancient warfare, this may very well be your cup of tea. It could be, for me, one of my favorite ancient games. I've got several. I've got the Great Battles of History series, Hannibal and Republic of Rome, Cataphract, Nero, Caesar. Got lots of ancient games. But this one is very clean. It's easy to learn and very playable. So all I can say is well done, Scott, and thank you for producing this wonderful game. Thank you for watching.